Let me start here. Not at the beginning of the marriage, not at the proposal, not at the moment everything went wrong. Let me start on a Tuesday morning, in a kitchen that was too clean, in a house that had gone very, very quiet. Russel Curtis was sitting at the kitchen table when this scene opens. Coffee going cold in front of him. Dressed for work but not moving. And if you were watching closely, if you were really paying attention, you would have noticed his left hand wrapped around that mug. Not resting beside it. Wrapped around it. Because there was no ring on that finger. He'd taken it off 2 days earlier. Quietly. No announcement. No argument. He just slid it off, set it on his nightstand, and Sharon never even noticed. Pause. Think about that for a second. 2 days. 48 hours of sleeping next to someone, passing them in the hallway, sitting across from them at dinner, and she never once looked at his hand. That's not just inattention. That's a marriage that had already become invisible to one of the people inside it. Sharon came downstairs that morning humming. Genuinely humming. Grabbed her keys, kissed the air somewhere near his cheek, not his actual cheek, the air, and said, "Don't wait up, I might go shopping after brunch." She didn't notice the ring. She didn't notice his face. She didn't notice the way he watched her walk out that door like a man memorizing something for the last time. When she left, Russell looked down at his bare hand. Then he picked up his phone. Stared at a text message, and whatever it said, it made his jaw tighten in that slow, controlled way that men do when they are choosing not to fall apart in their own kitchen. The phone buzzed again. He flipped it over. The name on the screen said one word, Dad. He stared at it. 1 second. 2. 3. Then he picked up. And I'll be honest, this is the moment I think the whole story turns. Not the betrayal. Not the confrontation. Not the begging at the end. This moment. A son picking up a phone call from a father he had spent years convincing himself he didn't need. Everything else flows from right here. 6 months before that Tuesday morning, Sharon and her best friend Tanya were getting their nails done. Laughing. Loud. The way women laugh when they feel completely untouchable. Tanya watched Sharon for a moment, and then she said it carefully like someone setting down something fragile. "Sharon. I'm only gonna say this once. I think Russell knows something is off. The way he looks at you sometimes." Sharon laughed. Big. Dismissive. "Tanya, please. Russell worships the ground I walk on." Tanya went quiet. Looked down at her nails. Said one word, "Emma." Just Emma. But here's what I want you to understand about that sound. That was not agreement. That was a woman swallowing something she'd already decided wasn't her burden to carry anymore. Now jump back to the present. Tanya is sitting in her car outside Sharon's house. Watching the front door. She picks up her phone, types something, stares at it, then puts it back down. Drives away without sending it. And this is where I have to be honest with you. Tanya knew. She had known for a long time. Not just about the deleted messages. She knew the whole foundation. How Sharon found out about Russell's last name 3 months into dating, how she'd connected the dots to Dominic Curtis, how she'd quietly accelerated everything after that. She carried that knowledge for 4 years. 4 years of watching her best friend build a marriage on a cracked floor and saying nothing. Sometimes loyalty and honesty are not the same thing. Sometimes the kindest seeming friends are the ones who let you keep lying to yourself because the truth would end the friendship. Tanya was about to stop choosing silence. She just didn't know it yet. Russell is in a parking garage. Engine off. Not going anywhere. He opens the glove compartment and pulls out a thick manila envelope. Opened and refolded so many times the creases are soft as cloth. He doesn't read it again. He already knows every word. He just holds it. We need to go back for a moment, because this envelope is everything. When Russell was 29, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From his father, Dominic Curtis. And inside that letter was the truth he had been denied his entire life. Bank statements showing his college tuition, paid anonymously. His mother Claudette's hospital bills, covered quietly. The down payment on his first car, routed through an account with no name attached. And tucked behind all of it, a photograph. Young Russell at a track meet, maybe 15 years old, mid-stride, arms pumping. And in the bleachers, barely visible, slightly out of focus, a man watching. Never announcing himself. Never approaching. Just watching his son run. Dominic had been there. The whole time. I don't even think Russell was fully angry when he read it. I think he was just wrecked. Because you can only be furious at someone you believe chose to leave. But a man who stayed in the shadows because he was trying to protect you, that kind of love doesn't make you angry. It makes you grieve every year you spend hating him. His phone rang. Sharon. He let it go to voicemail. She called back immediately. He let it go again. Then a text. Don't forget wine for Saturday. He stared at that text. Then at the photograph of his father in the bleachers. He started the car. Miss Odette's house smelled like Sunday dinner even on a Wednesday. Too many plants. Good light. The kind of home that feels like it's been praying for you before you even knock. Russel sat across from her, turning his mug in his hands, same gesture as the kitchen, same nervous energy, and said quietly, Daddy reached out to me, Auntie. Through the hospital. Said he'd been trying for a while. Miss Odette went very still. She set the pitcher down. Slowly. And here's the part most people overlook in moments like this. It wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't say immediately. That pause, that 3-second pause before a woman like Miss Odette speaks, that's guilt arranging itself into words. Baby, I need to tell you something. And I need you to stay calm. Russel looked at her face. Auntie? It wasn't what I did. A breath. It was what Sharon asked me not to do. And there it was. Sharon had intercepted 3 separate messages from Miss Odette, 3 separate attempts by Dominic to reach his son after his first cardiac episode. She deleted them. Then called Miss Odette personally and said Russel wasn't ready. Asked her to give it more time. Miss Odette, trusting her nephew's wife, agreed. Russel sat with that information in the quiet of that warm kitchen, with the clock ticking and Miss Odette's hands folded on the table, and he didn't scream. He didn't cry. He just nodded once, very slowly, like a man confirming something he'd already half suspected in the back of a place he'd refused to look. That kind of quiet is louder than any argument. This is the scene that unsettles me most. Not the betrayal. Not the begging later. This one. Russel came home that evening. Sharon was on the couch, wine in hand, legs curled under her, scrolling her phone. She looked up and smiled. Hey babe. There's food in the oven. Thanks. He went to the kitchen. Got 2 plates. Served the food. Set the table. Sat down across from her. They ate dinner. He asked about her day. She told him, something about a difficult client, something about Tanya being weird, something about wanting to redecorate the living room. He listened. He nodded. He even laughed once, a real-sounding laugh, not a performance. Sharon had no idea. None. But here's what the camera would catch if this were a film: his hands. He was cutting his food too precisely. The kind of precise that isn't about the food at all. And his ring was still off his finger. For the 3rd day now. She still hadn't noticed. At the end of dinner, as she cleared the plates, Sharon said brightly, Oh, Tanya was being so strange today. You know how she gets. Russel said nothing for a moment. Picked up his phone. Read something. Put it back down. Then quietly, Yeah. I know how she gets. Sharon laughed lightly and walked into the kitchen. She missed the entire weight of those 7 words. Sometimes people don't realize they're standing on a fault line until it's already shifted beneath them. Sharon was humming again by the time she reached the sink. This one broke me a little, honestly. 6 a.m. Russel already dressed, not for work. A small bag by the door, only essentials. He went to the kitchen first. Made Sharon's coffee the way she'd always taken it. 2 sugars, oat milk, the exact temperature she liked. Carried it upstairs. Set it on her nightstand. She was still asleep. He stood in the doorway and looked at her for a moment. And his face, this is the part that matters, was not angry. It wasn't cold. It was grieving. Like a man saying goodbye to a version of his life he genuinely wanted. Because here's what I think people miss about Russel Curtis. He wasn't leaving because he'd stopped loving her. He was leaving because he'd finally, after years of carrying wounds from his father's absence and pouring all that unprocessed longing into a marriage, started loving himself enough to stop accepting a foundation built on a lie. He picked up his keys. The manila envelope. Walked out. The front door clicked shut behind him. Sharon stirred 20 minutes later. Reached for her phone, 6:24 a.m. No good morning text. She sat up. Saw the coffee. Smiled softly to herself, touched by the gesture, still completely unaware. She picked it up. Took a sip. Her phone buzzed. A bank notification. Russel had moved his direct deposit to a separate account. Her smile dissolved. Russel. She called out to an empty house. The coffee was still warm in her hands and the house had never felt larger. Dominic Curtis's estate was not what Sharon had spent 4 years imagining. No cold marble. No ostentatious gates. It was warm, Art on every wall, books stacked on actual shelves people had actually read, afternoon light coming through tall windows. The kind of wealth that doesn't announce itself because it no longer needs to. Russell walked in and Dominic stood up from his chair. He couldn't speak for a full 10 seconds. He was trying. You could see the effort, the jaw working, the eyes already wet. Finally, "You look just like your mother." Russell said, "I know." They shook hands. Stiff. Painful. The most loaded handshake in the world. But it was a beginning. And sometimes a beginning is everything. Meanwhile, Sharon was calling back to back. Voicemail. 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 She called Miss Odette, who picked up and said 3 words, "Give him space," and hung up. She called Tanya. Tanya let it ring twice. Then answered. Sharon. Her voice carried the specific exhaustion of someone who has been waiting for this phone call for a very long time. "I think you need to sit down." And right there, in that split second between Tanya's words and whatever came next, Sharon's whole constructed world began coming apart at the seams. Not dramatically. Not all at once. The way things actually fall apart. Quietly, then all at once, with no warning and every warning simultaneously. Sharon went through the house looking for something. She couldn't even name what she was looking for. Just looking. The way people search when they already sense the answer but aren't ready to find it. In his home office, inside a fireproof box she'd walked past 100 times without curiosity, she found documents. LLC registration papers. Property records. A portfolio statement with a balance that made her sit down on the floor. $340,000. 2 flipped properties. A 3rd under contract. All of it built quietly over 2 years, inside the same house they shared, while she slept and brunched and redecorated her life around a man she thought she fully understood. She sat on his office floor holding those papers with shaking hands, and this is what I need you to understand. The shaking wasn't fear. It was the specific humiliation of realizing you underestimated someone completely. That while she had been calculating his value based on his father's name, Russell had been building something entirely his own. Something untouched by Dominic's money or Sharon's ambitions. Something purely his. She called her mother Brenda. "Mama. I think I messed up." Brenda, who had worked 3 jobs and lost the house twice and raised Sharon to survive at all costs, said, "Baby. What did you do?" Sharon couldn't answer. Because the full answer was something she'd never said out loud. Not once. Not even to herself at 2 a.m. when the guilt tried to surface. She just sat there on his floor. And for the first time in 4 years, there was nowhere left to perform. This is the scene that tells you exactly who Russel Curtis is. They were having lunch, just the 2 of them at a table in Dominic's home. Easy conversation by now, the stiffness softening into something tentative but real. And then Dominic slid a check across the table. 7 figures. For everything you missed. For the years. I know it doesn't. Russell slid it back. Immediately. Without glancing at the number. I'm not here for that. Dominic stared at him. And then something in the old man's face broke open. The good kind of breaking, the kind that's actually relief. He nodded slowly. Eyes wet. Your grandfather used to do that. Slide things back. Said if a man can't receive something with his hands free, it'll cost him his soul. Russell looked up sharply. You knew my grandfather? I built everything I have because of something he told me when I was 19 years old. And they went somewhere neither of them planned to go. Deeper into history, deeper into who they both were before the silence, before the distance, before all the years they'd both spent grieving each other from opposite sides of the same wound. Russell didn't take the check. But by the time he stood up from that table, he had taken something worth infinitely more. His father's number saved in his phone under a new name. Not Dad. Not Dominic. Just family. Sharon dressed carefully that day. She tracked the address through a mutual friend's social media. A comment on a photo, a tagged location, the kind of digital breadcrumb people leave without thinking. She wore the green dress Russell had always loved. Practiced what she'd say in the car mirror twice. She rang the doorbell. Heart hammering. Smile ready. The door opened. And it was not Russell. It was a man in his late 60s with Russell's exact jawline and Russell's exact stillness, wearing a cardigan, reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, holding a book like he'd just been interrupted mid-page. He looked at her with the specific calm of someone who has already been briefed. You must be Sharon, Dominic said. She could not speak. She had prepared for Russell's face. She had not prepared for this one. My son mentioned you might come by. A pause, not unfriendly but immovable. Come in. She stepped inside. And there was Russell standing in the hallway. Arms loosely crossed. And here is the thing that undid her completely. He wasn't angry. He wasn't cold. He was settled. Steady in a way she had genuinely never seen before. Like a man who had finally found the ground beneath his feet after years of walking on water. "How did you find this address, Sharon?" She had no good answer. And for the first time in their entire relationship, Sharon Curtis had nothing prepared. Everything she'd held back for 4 years came out in that living room. Sharon stood there, no performance left, no strategy, no carefully positioned version of herself, and she told the truth. All of it. She admitted deleting Miss Odette's messages. She admitted knowing his last name before their second date. She admitted connecting the dots to Dominic Curtis and making a decision, and her voice broke on that part, genuinely, the way voices break when shame finally finds its way out. She said she'd convinced herself it didn't matter because she eventually loved him for real. And the way she said it, for real, it almost sounded true. Maybe it was true. That's the complicated part. You can love someone and still have built the bridge to them on rotting wood. Dominic sat in his chair and gave nothing away. Russell listened to every word. Let her finish completely. The room was quiet. Then, "I know." She blinked. "You know? Tanya told me. Not to hurt you, because she was tired of carrying it." Pause. "The question was never whether you did it, Sharon. The question was whether you'd be honest about it on your own." She looked around, at this home, at his father, at the life she had miscalculated from the very beginning, and understood she had run out of room. "I love you, Russell." He looked at her for a long time. "I know that too." He didn't say it back. "And sometimes, I've learned this the hard way, sometimes I know is the most devastating response a person can give you. Because it means they believe you. They just don't think it's enough anymore. The last scene doesn't give you the happy ending. It gives you the honest one." Russell met Sharon one final time at a coffee shop. Nothing symbolic, nothing dramatic. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside were divorce papers. And a handwritten letter. She read it. We don't hear the words. We just watch her face move through a dozen different emotions in less than 2 minutes. Disbelief, grief, recognition, something that looked almost like respect. The letter said he didn't hate her. That he understood where her fear of poverty came from because he'd paid close enough attention to know it was never really about greed. It was about a little girl who watched her mother cry over shut-off notices and swore she would never feel that helpless again. He said the 4 years had made him sharper, more honest, more certain about what he deserved. He was not destroying her. He was releasing them both. And at the very bottom, one line, "If you do the real work, not for me, not for my last name, not for my father's money, call Miss Odette in a year. She'll know how to find me." Sharon folded the letter. Pressed it to her chest. Russell stood up. Buttoned his jacket. Left a generous tip, the way he always had, quietly without making it a moment. And walked out. Through the window she watched him get into a car. Dominic was in the passenger seat. Russell looked back once, not with longing, just with the settled gaze of a man who made a decision and intended to live inside it fully. The car pulled away. Sharon opened the envelope again. Stared at the divorce papers. Picked up her pen. The screen cuts to black before she signs. Because the real question was never whether Russell would forgive her. The real question, the one that lingers, the one that will keep people in the comments for days, is whether Sharon would finally do the work of becoming someone worth forgiving. That answer belonged only to her.